Let's go ahead and go through a few examples for identifying sample methods. And what we're going to do is identify the sampling method, the sample frame. You might have to guess sometimes. So when you get a problem, it just could be kind of general. The sample and possible sources of bias. If it's a stratified sample, you should identify the strata. And if it's a clustered sample, you should identify the cluster. So on our first example, we have 2,000 adults are surveyed about their confidence in the U.S. economy. The surveyors selected 500 people randomly in each of the 4 U.S. time zones using driver's license registrations. Our population, the people that we're trying to represent, are all people in the U.S. The sample frame is registered drivers in each time zone. So that's who we chose from. And our sample was 200 selected drivers. The method is a stratified sample. Basically, the 500 people from each time zone, and we picked them. And that's a good way to do it because sort of geographically, you want to represent different parts of the country because they do differently economically. All right, so the strata are 4 time zones. Sources of bias. Well, you could actually have undercoverage because you notice we're using driver's license registrations. So people who can't drive may be more likely to be unemployed and less optimistic about the economy. We could also look at time zones. There are different parts of the country that do well. And let's say we go with Central Time and most of our people come from Texas by chance. Texas' economy is better than most. So we would be more optimistic if most of the sample came from Texas. So there are different ways that you can find different sources of bias for this sample. The Cedar Ridge cafeteria wants to check student satisfaction with food quality. So they leave customer satisfaction cards at the register and the condiments section, which students can choose to pick up and turn in, and they receive 124 comment cards. Well, your population is Cedar Ridge students. The sample frame is students who go where the samples cards are displayed. So they would be kids who are actually buying food at the cafeteria. The sample is students who return the cards. The method is a convenience sample. This is not a random sample because people are kind of opting in, and it's really a convenience sample. We have an issue with voluntary response bias, so people who feel strongly about food quality are going to respond, and it also leaves out those who did not see the cards. For example, there may be students who don't eat at the cafeteria because they don't like the food quality, so they'll never see the comment cards. So you might have an overly optimistic report because the people who are commenting are people who buy food at the cafeteria. Another example. Every student in four elementary schools was interviewed about their ability to access the internet. The 4 schools were randomly chosen from 11 different elementary schools in the district. So our population is elementary students in a school district. Our sample frame was 11 elementary schools. Now I'm going to say the frame is 11 schools because we're picking 4, and I'm going to call it clusters, 4 elementary schools from the 11. There are other ways to do this. If I was just sampling one school and then sampling within it, I could say that the frame is the one school that I sampled from. So wherever you finally sample from, that's going to be your sample frame. My sample is all students in the 4 elementary schools. That's why I kind of felt confident with the sample frame of 11, because once I pick the elementary school, I have my sample. The method is cluster, and my source of bias basically assumes that all the elementary schools are similar to the general population. That may not be true. Maybe some elementary schools are in a poorer part of town where they don't have as much access to the internet. In fact, a stratified sample might be a better strategy here.